Ms. Moore, Ms. Plow did say she is here and accounted for on Skype with us. Hi, Ms. Plow.
Yeah, Leona, this is the very first. This is the very first official time in history
Yes.
that we can not only Skype in but also vote um, via teleconference. So welcome, Councilwoman.
All right, Mr. Mayor, at this time, we usually have a invocation. Oh, there he is. Reverend McDowell's here, and if you would, after you get settled, lead us in an invocation, sir.
You ready?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Oh God, for this day and for all that you've done for us, for the blessings of life, health, and strength, for your presence that covers each of us. Lord, we bow today to sit around the table and to hear the concerns and the laments of our community. Lord, we would simply ask that you might touch each one of us, sensitize us to your will and with your care. With all of the prevailing attitudes and the things that are happening in the world today, we humbly ask that you might shroud us with grace and with mercy. And for those who find themselves in disparaging and crisis situations, we pray for them, and particularly for this community called Columbia. We ask it, we claim it in your name. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Mayor, at this time, we will have the April 2016 financial report. Ms. Alonso, I know, has shared information with you all. If you all have any questions, she can answer them for you at this time.
Questions? Mr. Duval.
Ms. Alonso, I know that this is not your fault, but here we are beginning the first month of a new fiscal year, and we're getting a financial report for April of 2016. It's like watching a show and you know what the ending's going to be because you've already been through it, but you're getting a report back. What resources do we need to give to you and the finance department so we can get monthly financial statements?
Under normal circumstances, you would be getting May's right now.
We're looking at April.
These are April's because we hadn't gotten them to you before.
Okay.
It takes about a month for us to get everything in that we need to get, and we never give you June until the auditor looks at them. Okay, so you're always going to be behind. This one just happens to be because we missed last month. So you should be getting May. So we'll give you May, and we'll get you caught up. And what can you give me? You can always give me more staff.
More staff. I do think we need to think about that, though, because we're getting April report, and we've already spent the money for the last quarter of the year. Just a point.
Is that it? No questions?
Thank you, Jan. Moving into City Council discussion, we will start with the Vista Clean and Safety Team proposal. I know the mayor and council have been provided with some information from the Vista Guild and their executive director. If there are any questions that I can try to answer along with our staff, we have met with the Vista Guild and some of their board members, et cetera. Their executive director is here. I know that the perspective also from the CCP has been raised as far as some questions that some of you have, and I'm happy to try to speak on behalf of Mr. Kennel and CCP. I know he's probably here in the room. and can answer questions as well. So however you all would like to get started.
I thought I would start with just a little recap of the decision behind the Vista Guild deciding to operate our own independent Clean and Safe program. But thank you for having us. I am Meredith Atkinson. We do have several board members of the Vista Guild, residents, and some business owners and property owners here with us today. But just a couple of things just to kind of inform you of the reason we decided to operate our own Clean and Safe program. First, we wanted to have direct supervision and accountability for our team members. Every hospitality district in Columbia is very different, and we, the board of directors and executive director, feel like we know what those needs are in the Vista better than anyone. So we want to have that direct connection and that communication with our team members. So we're holding ourselves and our team members accountable to meet those needs of what our neighborhood needs. Secondly, and very important, we wanted to take a very conservative approach to using the funds that are generously given to us for this program. That is extremely important to us, and right now that priority with the $108,000 that you have allocated for Clean and Safe for 2016-17 is having as many boots on the ground as we possibly can. The Clean and Safe portion of what we do is incredibly important, and we want to grow our program as we are experiencing such growth in the Vista. So having those boots on the ground and using those funds that we are given very conservatively and responsibly is very important. So those two reasons were the big ones of why we decided to operate our own Clean and Safe program. I think you have seen, and if you haven't, I will certainly leave a copy, an overall budget of what we hope to have for 2016-17, and that's $175,000. And with that, we would have 5 full-time team members. That would double where we were just a few months ago or even last month. Again, with 5 full-time team members, we would be able to expand into these areas that are experiencing such growth. And we would also have that coverage from really early in the morning to as late as 11 and 12 at night to cover the activity and the hustle and bustle that we see every single day in the Vista. So our hope is to eventually have that expansion of our program. But right now we are operating with 2 full-time team members, and we'll be able to hire a part-timer hopefully within the next week. Our goal is to have that part-timer in and hitting the streets by the end of August. I do have our president, Hal Stevenson, with me today, again, as well as other board members. But we really thank you for the funds you've already given us. We feel like the Vista Guild Clean and Safe program is the most important service that we provide to our visitors, our guests, our residents, our merchants, and our business and property owners in the Vista.
Thank you, Meredith. Any questions for Meredith or Hal? Howard?
Meredith, thank you for your report. How is the transportation issue being taken care of?
With the $108,000 we were given, we had to really look closely at what our priorities were. Unfortunately, with the transportation that we did have with Block by Block and CCP, giving those shuttles from Main Street into the Vista and the Vista up to Main Street, we were at a $225,000 budget. So at 108, we had to decide pretty quickly what are our priorities, and our board and our committee decided 100% that was the clean portion of the Vista and our program. I feel like the clean and safe portion of this program and a transportation or a connectivity issue are 2 very, very different things. And right now, our goal is to keep our streets and our sidewalks clean and safe. And when I say safe, of course, I'm not talking about our wonderful CPD and Chief Holbrook and Captain Alden, what they do for us. I'm more talking about clean and safe, keeping the streets and sidewalks clean of debris, spills, and that kind of thing, and having that direct line with our CPD officers. So we had to make that tough decision, and that was very tough. But we serve 5.9 million meals every year in the Vista, and we feel confident those folks are going to find a way to get there, park in the garage, or whatever they need to do. I do think that connectivity is a bigger issue, and I would love to sit around the table and talk about that and really brainstorm on how the city as a whole could come up with some solutions for all the hospitality districts, not just Main Street and the Vista.
Are the wages that are shown in your budget that you attached to your letter comparable to what the city center partnership pays?
The wages, the hourly wages,
Yes.
they are. Our operations manager is paid a little bit more. He has a lot more responsibility now. And the other staff, team members, are paid similarly.
Ms. McDowell?
Yes. Meredith, one of the issues for me, of course, is the whole piece, and we've had this whole piece of connectivity. It was sort of my understanding that the 108,000 was a part of the connectivity piece. That's no longer being shared now. And of course, that's going to pose a real big issue. The thing that I'm probably most interested in is because we term ourselves Columbia being a place where we connect. Right now, there is a huge disconnection. How do we bring those folk to the table? And when I say everybody to the table, because connectivity is important not only in the life of the Vista, but it's important to the city of Columbia, Bull Street, the whole 9 yards. Can there be a movement, or can there be a table setting where all players are brought to the table and we simply form, for lack of a better word, a blue ribbon committee to talk about connectivity? Now, I must admit that if we don't do that, we're really going to find ourselves in a real bad quagmire. Is that possible?
I think it absolutely is. It's a discussion that my board and several other community leaders and I have been having for a while, and the need for some sort of comprehensive shuttle transportation system to get around. You know, I picture one day being able to have dinner in the Vista and drinks and dessert in 5 Points, and I think about how much more money I would spend and how much more H-tax would be generated if I was able to lengthen my evening or my afternoon to go from a ball game to dinner to drinks and desserts and hop around with ease without getting back into my personal vehicle and trying to move around and park in different areas. I think that is a much bigger conversation, and I would love to sit around the table with the different hospitality districts and community leaders and every one of you to have that conversation to see what we could do to start that. I do feel like because we needed to act and move into our next fiscal year with $108,000, again, our priority was the clean, so we decided to take that 108 and put it towards keeping our streets clean and our neighborhood vibrant and exciting, and a place that people want to be, and a place that they're going to want to come back once they visit. So that was the reasoning behind taking that 108. If we were to have operated with $108,000 as we were before with the shuttles, we would have gotten about 6 months. So we would have been back around the table with y'all in 6 months again, you know, asking for more funds.
I guess a statement, and then Matt, if I could have a question for Matt. But I guess the statement just is, this discussion isn't new. I mean, we met with the Vista several times, and we asked the Vista to look at what they could do and look at things, and I think that they weighed all options. I think that certainly everyone understands that CCP does a phenomenal job, and that works for Main Street. The 5 Points has something different, and it works for 5 Points. I think we need to allow the Vista Guild to look at what works for them, and you know, maybe there are some other things that we can that can happen that is working closer together. But you know, I certainly commend you for trying to take a difficult situation and make it work with less impact on the Vista. But, you know, we came back, they came to us 3 or 4 times about where they were, and CCP came with them. And so, you know, certainly this council at some point, if we wanted things to stay status quo, we probably should have had that conversation instead of saying, you go back and figure out what you're gonna do. But I do have a question, because I know people keep asking about the connectivity, and I was gonna ask Nat, I mean, I recall the shuttle was happening even before this, the Vista Guild had a clean and safe team, and I always considered the shuttle more a benefit of being downtown, and I've taken it to the Vista to eat, but I'm a downtown business person. So I was just wondering, from that standpoint, I understand cutting costs, and when you had the partnership, maybe the costs were shared, but why does the shuttle have to end if the partnership is over, because you were already doing that prior to? Oh, yes, sir. Yeah. I gotta get you on the mic.
Thank you, Ms. Devine, members of council. We have actually had the partnership with the Vista since September of 2015, 2014. So we had been doing the 2-district shuttle since then. Connectivity was one of the main reasons for that, and not just for shuttling, but the branding with the uniforms, with the uniform, you know, we're trained by the Convention Authority to give directions about both districts. Thank you. It was about presenting one Columbia, one city, and we have moved, in fact, since January of this year, about 8,000 people back and forth between the Main Street and the district areas, and that will end with this change. Because of the way...
My question is, because I remember several years ago utilizing it. It wasn't, I don't know if it was back and forth,
Yeah,
or maybe at the extent, but wasn't the shuttle dropping downtown people off in the Vista prior to this?
No, it was only used for elected officials, special conferences. There were occasions.
Did you just wrap up that line of questioning?
Full disclosure, you know, there were occasions when the Convention Authority would ask us to do that for something special. There have been some instances where somebody was staying at the Sheraton and needed diapers to get to Publix. We would do that. But because of the bid, and I think your city attorney would understand this, the way we're funded, we can't throw money over the fence. We are primarily funded through the Business Improvement District, even though we have some hospitality district funds. And we felt very strongly we couldn't take money that the property owners on the Main Street District were paying into and give it to the Vista District. So we only did that. I'm not saying we never did it, but it was the exception rather than the rule. And I'm just joking about the elected officials part.
Well, I'm glad you clarified, though, because I was kind of, when I was reading some of the emails, that was kind of my thought. I thought that we...
It was the exception. We did do it occasionally.
Are you done, Ms. Devine?
Well, I was just going to say, not for Matt, but maybe to Councilman McDowell's point and others, I do understand that USC is actually working with an organization to do, and that's probably just for students, but they are also having a shuttle service. So when you think about connectivity in the city, you know, there are some opportunities, I think, as Meredith has talked about, is looking at connectivity all over. And then, of course, I have to say, as we talk about connectivity, it's not just someone getting in a car and getting dropped off. We have to look at Assembly Street and pedestrian accessibility and those other things that make downtown seem more connected, so people will not feel like there are these artificial barriers.
Absolutely. When you talk about connectivity, I even think more towards, you know, safer crosswalks and sidewalks and things like that we need to improve the area so that folks can enjoy getting around, you know, and not feel like they have to be in a car, because that's where we need to be going, is walking to and from, you know, the Vista down to the museum or to the riverfront where the development is coming and up to Main Street. I want people to enjoy that walk and to be safe when they are walking.
Yeah. Larger discussion would be worth.
It definitely is.
Yeah, the larger discussion would be worth getting Ms. McDowell with maybe Dana and Kristen and others looking at all the different things we've worked on over the last several years to pull the two districts together, and particularly the divide that is Assembly Street that at certain points is wider than I-95, and some other design challenges that have been here since the birth of the city. So that's all we're talking about in terms of having a walkable, connected pedestrian or cycling experience we can talk about. On the very practical sense, I'm looking for everybody. At CFO, he's probably hiding somewhere. I mean, I know we made some decisions before regarding HTAX. The committee has not met. We're still waiting for maybe a final determination from us as to exactly how much funds are available. As of right now, there are none available in excess of what I think Howard's motion decided we'd appropriate last time. Where are we in that process? And
We were asked to come back once, you know, we were able to determine final numbers, Mr. Mayor, which was part of your motion.
okay, we had the fund balance and what 200,000 or something we sent to the committee, and then
We set aside $300,000.
Council identified 112, I do believe, and then you were going to see what was left over in surplus and then add some to that, and the committee would come back and meet to review the applications they had before them prior.
I thought it was 112 plus 200.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
it was 100,
yes.
yeah, from the museum, and yeah.
Yeah.
So the committee is waiting to meet.
Waiting to
Yeah.
confirm that 200,000, if there is that in surplus.
They're waiting for staff response. They're waiting for staff response.
Right.
Although we were assured there'd be much more than that available, we took a conservative approach by appropriating that.
That was my
200.
understanding, but I think the final analysis was from council that we would wait until we had that final figure, and then you all would give a solid figure to the committee, and we would come back and meet.
When do we expect to have that figure?
December.
That's a Jeff question.
October timeframe, I mean, that's typically.
When? I'm not hearing you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
When, I said October, someone said September, so why don't you give us the final?
Yeah, I
on
think
what
last
you
time
feel?
when we talked about it, except I think I was standing on that side down there. We talked about, we will have preliminary numbers in September, and someone did say maybe August. That wasn't me, though. We'll have preliminary numbers in September. Final numbers typically aren't till October, November. But for hospitality funds, and the finance director's sitting right back here, so I'm sure she's glaring at me, but September.
September. Well, the reason I'm asking is that, there are some other organizations that are also looking to hopefully get some relief. And I don't know that, because we also have some organizations, their activities are going to kick off before September. So I'd like us to be in a position to at least tell them something also. So that's why I'm really trying to,
Well,
the
I
sooner
mean,
we can get a date, the sooner we can give some straight answers to some folks. I can give some straight answers to folks. I don't know anybody else.
The committee is willing to meet whenever. I think that there was just a
Yeah.
discussion, instead of the meeting multiple times, to allow them to wait until we knew exactly how much. But, I mean, there isn't a certain amount that we know they have based on the recalculations we did. So if there are any important needs, we can ask the committee to meet.
Yeah, why don't we consider that? Especially some of the smaller.
My recollection is we took the $100,000 from the museum, and that Jeff forecast maybe up to $300,000 from general funds, so we backed that off to $200,000 to give him some slippage, and that's how we came up with a $300,000 figure. So I would think that the committee could take $300,000, and if Jeff has a really good year and he comes up with $600,000, and we want to put some more in the pot later on, have the committee meet twice. Right. That's exactly right.
Appropriate additional funds, that's a good inconvenience to have. The larger issue, larger philosophical issue that I'm usually on this side and on the opposite side of everyone else is the committee making decisions vis-a-vis council making decisions. And I'm not sure how y'all feeling about that right now.
I don't know that we,
Depending on who on council is gonna make the decision.
You can't have it both ways now. You guys want it one way one week and change it around the next week. So you're gonna figure that out. Apologize, didn't see y'all. I can hear you. But I was under interpretation, under the impression that we would be moving forward with the committee going ahead and meeting with the understanding that they had, at least at this point, $312,000 so at their disposal, not waiting until.
That was my understanding too, Mayor. Libby, call a meeting.
That's the will of this council. We can certainly do that. We'll get them together as soon as possible and disperse the 300 and 312, whatever the final analysis was. We can do that.
Make it clear now, I've always been not on the island by myself, but always determined it was council's prerogative to make independent decisions. I mean, we always validate literally 85 to 95% of what the committee recommends. I've never understood why 5% or 10% of a change, a deviation from that was often met with such uproar. But we're the ones who have to make those decisions and be held accountable to it. But for those decisions, but if in fact we feel one way or the other, we got to make sure we're consistent, whatever it happens to be. So. Just put that back on your table. Okay? All right.
what's the question? Maybe let me make sure I understand you. You're looking for some prerogatives from council.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Plow. I wasn't asking for a vote. I wasn't asking for a vote. No, but that's it's important to note that. However, we were not asking for a vote or a request or anything. But that's good to note that. We do reserve the right at 6 p.m. meeting to take up in a vote all items on work session agenda. I was speaking more so philosophically as to how you guys wanted to proceed.
Right, that's what I gathered. What he's asking is if we want the committee to handle it, then Libby can talk with John and the committee can go ahead and handle the allocation. But that was already a vote. We already made a motion to give money back to the committee. So we can just allow them to go ahead and meet. And the mayor was also asking that, but if council wanted to make allocations, we need to make that decision. My concern with that is we've already made a motion and voted that the money goes to the committee. So if that's the money that they've got to work with, go ahead and let them meet, let them make some decisions, and then if there is, we can always come back if there is an additional surplus, the money that we have not already voted to go back to the committee, and we can make that decision at that time whether or not council wants to keep money back for council's allocations, or if that goes to the committee as well.
So the issue is not the allocation of funds. The issues are the time parameters. Did we say September? Did I hear September? And what we're asking now is that we reposition that time parameter? Is that because of the added monies that will come in, or the amount of money, the $312,000 that's there now to be used?
The September date would only be if we're gonna wait for some preliminary, or more firm estimate from the finance department. But in my opinion, we already have appropriated $300,000 to the committee, and I agree with Tamika that we have made that motion, and we need to stick with it, with the prerogative of the council always to review the committee recommendations.
So a time parameter wasn't set initially.
Well,
No,
no,
that was the initial question. So
The initial
now
question was the allocation and the spending of the 312, right?
and when we
And
would know,
when?
but I don't think we have to wait. I think we've got $300,000, and give it to the committee, and they are very diligent in their review of those and see how it comes out.
How about, and you may have just said this, Howard, I apologize if I didn't hear you. We go ahead and reaffirm our appropriation to the committee with leave to come back and appropriate more, ask the committee meet post haste
Yes.
Post haste, because I know Sam, there's another organization that also has a September event that they need some decisions as to whether or not they'll receive funding as well. So we need the group to meet ASAP. ASAP. Okay. Yes. Yes. I think
No.
within. Sam later. Right now, I think the recommendation would be allow the committee to make its decision. From within the $312,000. We're not going to have any type of forced marriage. I mean, so we're going to talk about or request some type of specific performance. Let's go ahead, let the committee make the call. The funds would be on clean and safe, non-transportation. I mean, let the Vista Guild have its own program. But we just got to get in the habit. You know, I'm perfectly comfortable with council making decisions, whether work session or in general council meeting, Leona. But I just want to make sure we're consistent in how we continue to make these decisions. We can't pick and choose when we want to do it. So that would be the recommendation. Understanding that the transportation, unless you're moving elected officials, is no longer. That was a joke. Please don't tweet or print that. Is no longer the order of the day. But that we're fine with moving forward with a clean and safe program for the Vista. But we expect the committee to meet quickly, because I mean it's not just this program. There are a bunch of different folks who are waiting for decisions to be made. Mr. Davis.
I'll make this point, and you know I understand that everyone has a need. The pot is, given that number right now, very limited, and I'm hoping that the committee remain cognizant of the fact that there are a number of organizations that have needs, and we need to stretch that as evenly or as fairly as we can across the board. As you all know, I still advocate for some of the smaller groups that tend to take a beating during this process. Everybody has a good product, and I think the city deserves the opportunity to enjoy those products as often as we can, given the resources that we set aside for that process.
All right. How quickly you think you can get John together? Get John meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure I'm clear. The committee allocation that is potentially going for them to meet on right now, is that partially for them to consider the funding of the Yellow Shirts and the Vista, or is that, I think that if I could be clear on our end, we are sitting on 108, which gives us the same amount of clean and safe. The budget that we're asking for is 175. To double that and go further, we think we can make it for a while, prove that we're doing it. Perhaps there's some other funding for us down the road, either through council. Last year there was no Yellow Shirt funding for the Vista at all. There was some talk. We took it out of the committee process, and we're going to try to do multi-year funding because it made more sense to try to do that. So we're still for that. We're also very much aligned with Matt and those guys and the other entertainment districts, participating and cooperating some kind of transportation process that could come out of additional funds. So we're prepared to do it however you guys want us to do it, but that's kind of where we stand.
And I didn't, I'm not sure anyone asked this, Matt. The 108,000 in no way negatively affects the City Center Partnership, does it? Oh, well.
Matt, is that primarily, consist of the connectivity piece, the shuttle?
You have any questions of Hal, Meredith? Okay. We got some time to talk about this, and we'll have opportunity to act if we take any actions this evening, not today during the work session, as Ms. Flowers reminded us. All right. All right.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. And thank y'all. Thank you, Matt. We're not gonna be taking it back up in any formal way. If you guys have something a lot more fun to do right now, feel free to go do it. All right. What else we got?
Yes, sir. We will move into the October 2015 Historic Flood Recovery Update. There will be several members of staff and our consultants who will help present this information. If council recalls, this update is pretty comprehensive in that we're looking for some feedback from council on things such as property acquisition and how we need to move forward with meeting some deadlines that we are up under, particularly for CDBG block grant funding specific to Columbia for disaster recovery. So at this time, we'll start with Mr. Joseph Reichert, our Program Controls Manager from Landmark Consulting. Yes, sir.
I have a question before we get started. I think based on what I'm thinking I'm going to hear has some bearing on my question. General, for some clarity, there were, in addition to some of the raising of properties and in some cases eliminating for green space, there was also, and there is relief for housing that was just basically damaged as a result of the flood. Am I correct?
Yes.
Now, what if they were not included in the numbers and the estimates that we have now? How can a property owner be included in the funding set-asides and granting of the dollars for repairs due because of the floods? That's a simple way of my.
Well, I think ultimately, you know, there would have had to have been some documentation on their part through FEMA and applying early on that they were in fact damaged and were damaged as a result of the flood. We're going to talk to you all about various funding sources. Obviously, property acquisition is one piece of it, but if we decide as a city to move forward with like a pot of funding for repairs, whether it's residential or commercial, then that would be the opportunity for that resident or business owner to.
I know personally I've run across two situations where they did not go through that process, but it's clear that the damage is there and it's due to the flood. So how do we get them into the process, either what they may qualify from FEMA and other federal dollars, or within whatever process that we may come up with?
I think we would work with them to be a part of whatever process we come up with, Mr. Davis, but I think, again, it would have to be obviously some clear documentation on the damage was a result of the flood. Because all of these funds, I mean, you're dealing with federal dollars, you know that we're gonna have to have proof that it was a result of damages from the flood.
And it has to be the 100-year flood.
Well, the funds, you know, that are allocated to the city and the other entities, the guidelines and the language reads that it has to be as a
What if it was a family resident that was being impacted because of flooding after 100 years and has been damaged incrementally? Then the flood further exaggerated that, but they did not apply. I know that's
I think the reality is if they didn't register for FEMA, and that's why we kept pushing that people needed to register. If they did not register, then they would not be eligible for flood relief funds because there's no record that they were impacted by the flood.
So they got, for FEMA doesn't do a lot of individual assistance, except for immediately after a disaster, they come in and offer assistance for living. But what you're talking about is for rehabilitation, that would fall under the CDBG disaster recovery plan. That wouldn't fall under the FEMA grants that we have going. The CDBG is individual assistance, and that plan hasn't been finalized, so there's still opportunity for anyone that hasn't been included to be
So
included.
we need to communicate with this type citizen, and okay, I'll take it from there, and we'll talk.
I think once we go through the presentation too, it may become clearer, and that is, you know, part of the input we want to get from council on how you want to move forward. I do think, though, ultimately, even with the CDBG dollars we're obviously going to have to follow the guidelines as to what it says as to how we determine damages from individuals to assist them.
That's fine.
But I wouldn't think that, like you said, if it was a problem that was exacerbated by the flood, I mean, I would think hopefully there's a way for us to assist them.
Thank you.
CDBG, it's one of its main focus in federal laminate is unmet needs. So if either you applied for or were denied any of the grants along the way, or just didn't apply, you have an unmet need, that's where CDBG kicks in and picks up what got left out.
Thank you. I'm educated.
All right? So hopefully we can, it can get confusing. We've got several different funding sources associated with the program, and they can all get confusing. So we got eight different grant types. We got FEMA Public Assistance and 406 Hazard Mitigation. They kind of go hand in hand. We got the CDBG Disaster Recovery. We got 404 Hazard Mitigation that is not directly related to an event. We got the NRCS Waterway and Debris Removal, Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant Program, and the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. So all these are funding sources associated with our program right now, and they're all in different stages of maturity. Right? None of them are finalized yet. We're in developing. And so we're going to focus more on just the general program, but we're going to kind of focus on the property acquisition aspect of the program, which is going to utilize the 404 hazard mitigation, the pre-disaster mitigation, and the flood mitigation assistance. That's the three sources we're going to focus on with this. So the property acquisition part of the program is a substantial part, and it's an important part because it affects the people in the community directly. The city is putting together a committee to help manage, oversee, and guide this program throughout the process. It's going to include representation from the Public Works, Planning and Development, City Engineer, Floodplain Manager, and City Program Manager, and support staff. We're going to have a dedicated project manager and a case manager working with all the people that are participating. The objectives of the task force, to date we've identified 236 properties that are eligible for property buyout or acquisition. So we're going to continue to look for any other that are eligible. Make sure that they are eligible, because we send out notices, a letter of intent or interest form, and we've received some back. This group is going to help prioritize these properties, because we don't anticipate that funding is unlimited. So with the funding we have, we need to prioritize the projects that we want to move forward with. Help manage the approval process, request the grant sources associated with each project, and act as a case management for applicants. So this is a summary of the acquisition process, and it's pretty lengthy. It's a 18-month plus process. They say from the date of disaster, but we're currently in the phase 1 application phase, and we're several months past the date of disaster. We're about 2 months into the 18-month process. And that would be if everything goes really good and there's no additional disasters that FEMA has to take time to go and address. So it's not short and it's not easy. But it's not much different than, buying or selling a house. We're just doing it a whole bunch of times. So we got phase 1's the application. Phase 2, we look at our environmental and appraisals. Then we move on to verification of benefits, making sure that if it's a repetitive loss property, they have had repetitive loss, and to make sure we're not duplicating any benefits. Phase 4 is where we do our offer to the property owner and a contract execution. Phase 5 is relocation, if applicable. We may have some situations where relocation is involved and may not. This is an all-inclusive phase. Not all phases apply to every property that we'll be working with. Then closing a deal. After that, now the city owns the property, so we go into the demolition and remediation of the property, depending on the type of grant that we use. Is it green space in perpetuity, or can it be repurposed? And then final phase is a closeout deed restriction monitoring. Any restrictions that was part of the sale needs to be monitored for compliance. Like I said, we're in phase 1. Phase 1 will continue until the end of August. We'll go through some dates in a minute before we really start getting solid information and can move forward. Like I said, we got 3 main funding sources for the acquisition projects. It's the 404 hazard mitigation, the pre-disaster mitigation grant, and the flood mitigation. So the 404 hazard mitigation program, it was intended to be the primary source for any property acquisition or buyouts when we were planning this effort. So the state prioritizes and selects projects that are cost-effective and reduce repetitive losses in the following categories: housing, dams, planning, and other. Local governments compete for this funding. The state is allocated a fixed dollar amount. In this case, I believe the latest number we have is $36.6 million. And based on the application submitted by all the applicants, not just the City of Columbia, they go through and prioritize first the category of funding, and then within the category, they'll go through and prioritize the projects within each category. So we may or may not be funded for all of the projects that we have in 404, which the home buyout program is one of 12 projects that we've submitted under 404 mitigation. So 404 is not exclusive to property acquisition. We have 12 different projects that we have been approved to move to final application, and the home buyout program is one of those projects. So some of the notes is a primary source. October 1st is when the state submits the applications to FEMA. And the property owners may receive assistance up to the pre-event fair market value of the property. The city will establish a process which will be approved by SCHEMA and FEMA. The increased cost of compliance claim can be used for grant match, demolition, and structure relocation. That's in addition to the 404 funding. We're saying that you could put that money together. It's not saying that you can use the ICC or increased cost of compliance money as to cover the 25% match required. And then, once acquired by the city, the property must be dedicated in perpetuity for open space, recreational, and wetlands management. It means we can never resell it or redo it. We have to own it and manage it, maintain it, or let it go back wild to wetlands and natural forest type. With this one, as with our other funding sources, the actual award amount won't be determined until after October when the state submits the final applications to FEMA. At that time, they'll go through, they'll do their analysis, they'll run their math, and make awards. So that's kind of the unknowns at this point. So more about the 404 funding. The state will reduce buyout assistance by any duplication of benefits. Examples of that is payments made to homeowners for repair assistance, insurance settlements, small business administration loans, and any other payments made to address property loss. Now, this don't include any funds that individuals or families were given for rent and food and immediate need right after the storm. And then there's a but to this. Unless the owner can provide receipts showing the benefits were used for their intended purposes to make repairs to the property. So if you received insurance benefits and you took those insurance benefits and you repaired your property, you will not get a deduction for what you received from the insurance. However, if you take those insurance benefits and you pay off your mortgage, you're going to be deducted that amount, whatever you receive from insurance, from the award to the grant. All right. Another source of funding is our PDM, a pre-disaster mitigation grant. This is a grant that does not require the homeowners to have insurance and still be eligible. It's funded through FEMA Regional Office, and its goal is to reduce overall risk to the population and structures from future hazard events, while also reducing reliance on federal funding for future disasters. There's two types of grants associated with the PDM grant. First, you have project grants and planning grants. We're focusing on project grants. FEMA will prioritize, and this is a competitive grant also. FEMA will prioritize the competitive projects for selection. Some of the criteria they use is climate resilient mitigation activities, non-flood hazard mitigation projects, acquisition, elevation, and mitigation reconstruction projects, generators for critical facilities included in FEMA-approved mitigation plan. FEMA will further prioritize competitive sub-applicants like small or impoverished communities, validated residential and commercial building codes, and a validated benefit cost ratio analysis. Again, this is a competitive grant, which means there's a limited amount of funding, and for 2016 it was $575,000. It is a recurring grant. It's not tied to a disaster. So every year this grant is available on a competitive basis. And the amount per year varies. But for 2016, it's $575,000. The third funding source that we're working with is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. This grant is funded through the National Flood Insurance Fund, and its goal is to reduce flooding properties through mitigation, thereby reducing flood insurance claims. Again, they got two types of grants. We got project grants and planning grants. It varies a little from the PDM because you do have to have insurance to be eligible for this grant. It includes mitigation projects, elevation, relocation, demolition, acquisition, and flood reduction projects. The applicant must have an NFIP flood insurance, and the community must have a approved hazard mitigation plan. We covered there. It must have a benefit cost ratio of 1 or greater. And if the project cost is below 276 for acquisitions and 175 for elevations, we do not have to have the benefit cost ratio analysis. It must meet the following cost shares. Insured properties, up to 75% granted and a 25% match. Repetitive loss properties, up to 90% funded and up to a 25% match. When I first read that, I'm like 90 and 25 is more than 100. That's just saying the maximum. It could be 90, and the maximum match would be 25, and anywhere in between. Severe repetitive loss properties are eligible for up to 100% funding with no match required. In the planning grants, they also offer a planning grant up to $25,000 to help community create a mitigation program. That requires a 25% match. Again, this is a competitive grant. It's available every year, just like the other one. Up to $25,000 for planning. That's the three major funding sources we're looking at. So this is an overview of some of the upcoming major milestones associated with both the property acquisition project and the flood recovery project in general. The latest one we met was the final application for the FMA. That was on 6/6. Coming up this week, we got two big ones. It's a risk analysis and implementation plan for the CDBG. Fred's going to talk more about that in a minute. And a stakeholder meeting associated with the CDBG development. The 28th, we have another public information session associated with CDBG. The homeowner application deadline for 404 HMPG is August the 12th. Our final applications are due to the state September the 1st. So we need all applications in from homeowners by August the 12th so that we can prepare the application to meet the deadline. August 25th, we have another public information session associated with the CDBG. And then the next two are big ones, the FMA and PDM, the 8/30 award anticipation date. This is gonna give us some solid information to move forward with. We're gonna know how much money we're working with and what we can apply to this project. But right now, we're working on some assumptions, thinking, we're gonna get, but we don't know what it's gonna be. So after August 31st, we'll be able to move forward with it. The 404 application date is September 1st. And then our CDBG plan is due to HUD on September 20th. HMPG, again, with the property acquisition, the state submits to FEMA on October 1st, another big date for us. That's going to give us a little more insight to what we're working with going forward. And then the final CDBG on 11/4. So, in summary, we got three major sources of funding, and we got approximately 63 interest forms have been returned to us out of the 230-something we submitted. We're going to be following up we're going to be sending out another certified letter this week to see if we have any other properties that are interested that did not respond. The PDM, the FMA, and the 404, we're developing. We're looking at the end of August, the 1st September before we got anything concrete, but so far so good. So, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Fred Tombar to go over the action plan development. Yes, sir.
Give the dates when we're gonna know about FEMA funds and HUD funds again. I got on this thing here, final action plan due to HUD on September 20th. Will we know how much money?
Well, the action plan, we know how much money, because that's associated with the CDBG. There's lots of dates. When you say FEMA, that's a broad one. So how much money we have for the buyout program?
Yeah.
It's going to be after the state submits to FEMA 404-10-116, second from the bottom. It's at that time we're going to have a pretty good idea, because we're going to know what the state is submitting to FEMA. And typically what the state submits, unless there's some major hiccup, that's what gets awarded.
We've already identified the properties. Is that what I'm reading? We've already identified the properties.
Okay, so let me clarify.
Just want to clarify, we will submit September 1st, and the state will submit it to FEMA October 1st. We will know by then how much we have requested. We don't know how much FEMA will approve until they come back. The very earliest we have been told, best case scenarios, and that was hesitant to even get this kind of a response, was 6 months.
All right, let me ask you. You've identified 236 pieces of property. Is that included, does that include the 25% with more damage? How is that interpreted?
Yes, sir, it does. It includes properties that were 25% or more damage within the floodplain or repetitive loss. That is correct. Okay. I'm gonna turn it over to Fred Tombar with Plexos, and he's gonna give you an update on the status of the action plan development. Thank you.
Let me just ask one, not a clarifying question, but just a question. We've identified those properties. Is it possible for us to see demographically where those properties are?
Yes, it is. And we actually were working on that. We didn't quite have it ready for today, but yes, it is possible to do that.
Well, it certainly helps in our districts and, of course, citywide, if we could identify and see where those properties are.
It's a very useful tool. It's a good question, because we've started putting it together, and it really kind of shows with the concentrations of the property.
All right.
So,
Good.
yes, that
So
will be
that's
available
forthcoming?
shortly.
That's forthcoming.
That is forthcoming, yes.
All
sir.
right.
The properties would be from the properties that we did submit to council early on. So we showed council early on by district, the various properties that we reached out to, we got responses back from. So now this would be the comprehensive list. Okay. So it would be from that original list that you got, but this will be the final list now, Reverend McDowell.
Good. Thanks.
As Joe said, my name is Fred Tombar, and I'm with the Plexos Group, and I work specifically on a task associated with the city's allocation of HUD Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. And just to give you all a sense of what this source of funding is and how you all came to receive it, because Joe talked about a number of sources of funding that are related in some ways, but wanted to make a distinction here. After major disasters, major and catastrophic disasters like the one experienced here in the city of Columbia, sometimes the federal government, through Congress, acts to provide supplemental disaster recovery funds through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, through its community development block grant money. And the city lobbied Washington for funds following your disaster, and in December, tied to the omnibus bill, there was $300 million made available for communities in both South Carolina and Texas that were impacted by disasters last year. HUD takes a look at the data that's available from those specific disasters that Congress appropriated the money to address, and makes an allocation formula out to each of the impacted communities. The city of Columbia got its own allocation, along with, as you all are probably aware, Richland and Lexington counties, as well as the state of South Carolina for other affected communities within the state of South Carolina. Your allocation was just short of $20 million, $19.98 million. And HUD put out a notice just short of 30 days ago that laid out the rules associated with the use of this funding. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about those rules at a fairly high level, and then get into some discussion about what are some of the preliminary thoughts that the city has been thinking about in terms of using that money in keeping with those rules, and how we plan to begin to socialize some of those ideas and get feedback around them and help to refine them with the input and help of the community. So that notice, as I said, was just issued back a little less than a month ago. And there was one new requirement that was pretty significant that required that the City of Columbia do what HUD is calling a risk analysis and put together what is described as an implementation plan. And that risk analysis simply is taking a look at some of the core infrastructure and foundational things that you all need to have in place, policies, procedures, are those in place because what HUD has recognized in its history of doing these disaster recovery grants is that there's certain things that make grantees like the City of Columbia more effective in the administration and implementation of the programs. And so they're requiring some of that work to be done up front so that when you get around to actually running the programs, you'll be in better stead and better position to deliver the money more quickly to people who have a need for it. What the register required, as the councilman pointed out, is that the city puts together a final action plan by September 20th of this year. And so some of the work that we've begun doing already is going to feed into that final action plan. HUD will give itself a lot of time to review that plan. It gives itself up to 60 days, and so it could be that we hear back sooner, but they have up until November 19th to make a determination and finally review and approve the plan. So it may not be until after sometime near Thanksgiving that we actually are able to begin implementing and administering the programs. Just if I could, give you a brief overview of CDBG-DR generally, and it applies in this case with your particular allocation. All of the activities that are done with this funding, I say activities, programs, if you will, that's HUD speak, activities, HUD CDBG speak. The activities that are done with these funds must meet one of the HUD national objectives, HUD CDBG national objectives. And they're pretty broad. They are, one, you can reduce slum or blight. Two, you can address the needs of low and moderate income families. And three, deal with some urgent need. So your disaster, for example, in October, gave you the opportunity to address an urgent need. And some of the city's annual allocation of CDBG funds was actually put towards that urgent need, immediately addressing some of the needs of the community. So those are those three broad categories. So we'd have to make sure it fits into one, any of the activities fits into one of those three broad categories. But when it comes to disaster recovery funds, Congress is specific about, one, who can get it, so the communities impacted in South Carolina and Texas. But beyond that, who within those communities can get it and how it can be used. And it must be used to address an unmet need that stems from the disaster event itself. So there was this discussion earlier about how do we go about determining eligibility, and I know the councilwoman mentioned using FEMA registration as a precondition for determination about whether the disaster, whether the impacts to a structure, a home, a business were in fact from the disaster. And that's somewhat common and ubiquitous in application and administration of a CDBG disaster recovery program, using the FEMA registrations, using SBA registrations for businesses, and FEMA approved PA projects as a determination about whether or not it was in fact a disaster impact. So we would be looking at an unmet need. So how do we define unmet need? It's a little bit of what Joe talked about earlier in his presentation. First and foremost, you look at private insurance. So what insurance is out there to address those disaster impacts and to the extent to which it covers those losses. After that, any other federal assistance that's come in. Joe went through a number of types of FEMA funding for individuals. They could receive some FEMA individual assistance up to a little bit above $30,000 in some cases to help with addressing the impacts to an individual home. For businesses, they are eligible for loans from the Small Business Administration, as well as some homeowners would be eligible for low-interest loans from the SBA. So any of those funds that were provided, in addition to funds that were made available through a private insurance, would have to be taken into account relative to the damage, the impact from the disaster itself. And if there is anything that, a gap, if you will, that remains after that, that's how we go about defining the unmet need. So what we are using right now, we've been through a long and protracted back and forth with FEMA to get the data on all of the folks who registered in the days and weeks following the disaster. And FEMA's initial assessments of the amount of damage that they had, as well as some information on other benefits that they received from insurance and certainly any benefits that they received from FEMA and from the SBA. So those will help us to begin to understand the scope of the unmet needs that are there for people who were impacted in homes and in both rental homes and home ownership. There also is a data analysis that we're doing in data collection that we're doing from the SBA for businesses to similarly assess the impact on businesses and where the unmet needs exist for businesses. And I'll get into why we're grabbing those data other than trying to understand and identify what the unmet needs are. And obviously, there was great infrastructure damage here in the city, across the city, to a number of water projects and things like that you all have been talking about and know about well. And so I won't go into those. But those obviously would be something that would be eligible because it's an ongoing unmet need from the disaster. One of the things that HUD did in this particular notice with your allocation is said that 70% of the overall benefit has to go to low and moderate income individuals. So that would be individuals who are at or below 80% of the area median income. So for a family of 4 here in Columbia, we're talking about someone with an annual income at or below $49,350. 80% of your allocation has to go in some way to benefit those folks. So that's roughly about $14 million of your $20 million. I mean 70%, I'm sorry, 70% has to go to people who are at 80% of AMI. That's, got my mix a little talked up, I'm sorry. So that's a departure actually from what has been the norm in the past for HUD. The benefit in the past, the required benefit has been at 50%. I like to say that floodwaters don't knock on your door and ask how big your bank account is before they decide to come in. And so there is some allowance that that's given in a disaster recovery context. But in this case, HUD looked at the disaster and saw that there were quite a number of low and moderate income people impacted and has made that requirement that 70% of the benefit goes to low and moderate income individuals. One of the things that is another departure is that all the funds have to be expended within 6 years. The first time we saw this was in the allocation for communities impacted by Hurricane Sandy, and so it seems now it's going to be a standard for HUD going forward that putting a hard milestone on when the funds have to be expended. So I want to turn, if I can, to some of the considered activities, if you will, that are on the table right now. And this is just from discussions of what it appears that some of the unmet needs are from initial data analysis and from just anecdotal discussions within the community. The first priority that the city has set is on addressing the needs of housing. These 3 categories that we have here are the categories that the CDBG program generally has. Your annual appropriation requires that you use the money either in housing, in economic development or in infrastructure, and that follows for your disaster recovery funding here. And so in housing, some of the preliminary thoughts are a housing rehabilitation program. So there was some discussion about helping people out whose homes were damaged in some way and haven't had enough resources from the various types of resources that they had to address the needs. So some type of housing rehabilitation program. We know that there are a number of people in the community who recognize that they are certainly susceptible to repetitive loss in an area that could flood again potentially, and so have made the decision to elevate their homes. This is one of the things that the federal government has policy-wise been encouraging, is mitigation measures like elevation. And so the city is considering strongly encouraging people to do more of the mitigation type activities and elevate homes. There is research that shows that for every $1 that's spent towards mitigation, there's at least a 4 to 1 return on investment in a subsequent disaster. And actually in a flood event, there's research that shows that it goes up to as much as 12 to 1 return on investment. So doing something like elevation really has an overall benefit to your community and to the individuals that participate in it. Another is affordable housing development. Again, 70% of the benefit has to go to low and moderate income people. It turns out that the data shows that a fair number of the renters who were impacted and have an unmet need that remain were low and moderate income people. And so there's an opportunity using some of your existing programs. The city has done well with addressing the needs of affordable housing in a community with the resources that it gets annually from HUD, both in terms of home ownership and in terms of affordable rental development. And so we're really looking at leveraging and plussing up some of those existing programs to address some of the affordable housing needs that remain from the disaster.
So Fred, is there a nexus that has to exist between this type of development and those who take advantage of any new development? Do they need to be people who are displaced by the flood, or is this more generally meeting the needs of people who are in the city?
So generally what happens, what you see happen is that a right of first refusal, if you will, a targeting is done to people who show up as folks who have an unmet need from the disaster. So again, we have the FEMA data and it'll show us who those people are. Unfortunately, a lot of times what you find is, especially for development of affordable rental housing, I mean, the development timeline is so long that folks will find other housing and get placed and don't want to move, even though they're given that right, and you're reaching out to them. So I just want you to know up front that the sort of success rate of going directly to the people who the data shows are the ones that HUD made the allocation to the city for, and their use of the benefit, if you will, on the back end hasn't been high in actual application, but we would certainly reach out to those people and let them know that the benefit is there for them.
Okay.
And the fourth thing that we're thinking about in terms of housing is property acquisition in some way, and that would dovetail and actually meet some of the match requirements that Joe was talking about. In terms of economic development, there are a number of programs. In talking to Tina Herbert, I want to say Hebert, being from Louisiana, we've talked about. One that certainly makes a lot of sense is using an existing program, which is the Federal Economic Development Administration's Disaster Loan Capitalization Program. You all use a disaster loan capitalization program here now for businesses, but in a disaster recovery context, the terms are much better, much more favorable. There is if you will, a 5 to 1 leverage. So for every dollar you put up, there would be 4 to 1 leverage, I would say. There is, for every dollar you put up there's 4 that the federal government would put up in there. So for every $200,000 you put in, there's $1 million worth of benefit to the city overall. So that's one that we are seriously considering. Again, we're working with the SBA to get the data on the unmet needs that remain for the business community, so we can right-size any type of program that we would do in this EDA Disaster Loan Fund capitalization. And then finally, in infrastructure, in the area of infrastructure, we're looking at a number of wastewater and water projects as well as some stormwater projects. As you all know from many discussions since the flooding in October, that there was tremendous impact to the city's infrastructure in all those areas. As I said, we are endeavoring to socialize these ideas with the community, and actually the first of those opportunities would be just on Friday of this week. We're going to be partnering with the city, with Richland County. They already have scheduled and invited us to participate in a stakeholder session they're doing at the Columbia Housing Authority on Friday morning. Specifically, they're targeting a discussion to housing service providers there. And so understanding what the impacts were to some of those organizations and the people they serve, and how the funding both in Richland County and in the city of Columbia might be able to target and address the needs of some of those the people that the housing service providers are working with. And then we'll have a more general and broad community outreach session next week on Thursday evening. That will be at Adesto Discovery Park, and we're working to publicize that. I know that Gloria is going to be doing some local media things, and we have an outreach strategy to community groups where we'll begin notifications within the next day or two to them about the opportunity to come out and, one, hear some of what I presented to you all, but also to hear from them on what some of the ongoing needs are and impacts are, so that we can better target these programs and the funds associated. And then finally, HUD requires that there be a 2-week public commentary period when we actually produce a draft of the action plan. And so the plan is on August the 25th to have at the Drew Wellness Center a public outreach session, and there people will actually be able to comment on the draft of the action plan as presented, and we'll be able to get some feedback from the community on what we have there. HUD requires that any of the commentary that we hear from the community, both in sessions like that and generally from putting the plan up on the website, which is being developed. There's a specific CDBG-DR website that the city is developing and will make available to provide, one, ongoing notification of developments with regard to the CDBG-DR funds, but also to make available a copy of the action plan, the CDBG-DR action plan, and an opportunity for people to provide comments. We would then have to collect and categorize all those comments and then respond to them. HUD is going to be evaluating how the city responds to those comments in its approval decision on the action plan itself. So really encourage the participation of the community there, and would use that to better, as I said, inform and define the overall development of that action plan. Mm-hmm. With that, open for any questions.
Questions, John?
There's one on Friday of this week to housing service providers at the Columbia Housing Authority, and then next Thursday on the 28th, there would be one at the Adesto Discovery Park. That's more broad and open to the larger public. Yes, ma'am. This Friday, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
That's at 10 a.m.
I'm gonna let Fred say the time. I'm gonna say the place. Okay, he's not from around these parts. It's Edisto. Is that next week? Okay, you can say Edisto.
No,
okay.
that's Columbia Housing Authority.
It's Edisto though. It's
Okay,
Edisto.
all right.
Edisto.
Help me
That's
out.
the name. That's okay.
So this Friday morning, Ms. Clow, it's at the Housing Authority at 10 o'clock a.m. For this, and that's a joint stakeholders meeting with Richland County.
For housing service providers.
And,
Providers. Public ones.
and next week, the 28th. Next week, the 28th.
some of the nonprofits that work with
Like our,
homeless.
Like the Chodos and,
Yes.
Chodos and people who do development of housing.
Homeless service providers as well. Gloria Said is saying. Potentially. I don't think everybody's going to be turned away necessarily. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe, I think more so other affordable housing providers like nonprofits and homeless services providers.
A question and then a comment. My question is, when do you I know you need to get the input, but when do you anticipate having a draft of the action plan ready for us to review?
Sure. It, excuse me, it would be on or about, I think it was around the teens of August that we were targeting to have it done. I apologize for not.
Okay, that's fine. Just give me a roundabout, okay? And then my colleague my comment is more so for my colleagues, because again, when you talk about unmet needs, and even before the flood, we have a huge unmet need of affordable housing, affordable rental housing in this community. And I think that if that is part of our action plan, we also, as a council, need to understand that that is a priority, and stick to that as a priority. I know I'm not the only one who's gotten letters in the last week from people who are opposed to affordable housing in their community. That happens every time affordable housing project is proposed in a particular area, and I just think that we have to be very cognizant of that. It is, when you look at the guidelines, you talk about 70% of the money has to be spent, 80% median income. Affordable housing is identified as an unmet need. If there are proposals that come forward and we partner with people, we as a council have to be true to that and stick to that. And I get frustrated when I hear, and I don't know about y'all, I've read every single letter I've gotten last week, and some of them have been very offensive about affordable housing and people that affordable housing developments serve. So we as a council have not in the past been as strong in sticking to understanding that affordable housing has to go somewhere in our city. So if we take this money and we have to spend this money within 6 years, we need to stay strong and realize that we have to work with our community and help them understand what the needs are and understand how positive this can be for our community.
And to that end, there are things in this notice that are new that we're having to comply with, but there are also larger policies that have been put in place in the last couple of years at HUD. In particular, the requirement for affirmatively furthering fair housing for any HUD grant recipient. And so that is pretty clear about the need for communities to look for opportunities to put affordable housing in communities of opportunity, I think is the term that's used. And that becomes a challenge. I know NIMBYism and things like you were describing always become a challenge when trying to do just that, affirmatively further fair housing. But it is a federal requirement that is to which we would have to comply in implementing these programs. No way around it.
Thank you. Mr. Duval?
I enjoyed your in-depth presentation, but can you give me a time when we're going to get a dashboard of the HUD programs and a dashboard of the FEMA programs that will say, we've got this approved amount of money and this is where it's going to be spent? When is that available?
I don't want to speak
Well, that
to
doesn't give the
those
timeline, though.
That's your dashboard, Missy?
On the city website, we have a link to the flood recovery program. worksheets, a lot of information. Don't have the answer to how many dollars are going to be spent. We can tell you today what has been obligated and what we anticipate. But if you check out the website, have you been there?
Well, I was there last council meeting when he was giving us a briefing.
We constantly building on that and improving on that. It's getting to be a pretty useful tool now.
Okay.
It has a lot of information about what we have outstanding. It has a map of all the project with brief descriptions. It has a status of each of the PWs through the life cycle of where they're at. And we continuously working to improve that dashboard. As we get solid funding information, we do put it up there. But we don't put it up there when we speculate or assuming anything. Because it's a public website, we don't want to throw something up there as an assumption and then be wrong. We have to answer it.
Specifically on the CDBG funds, the councilwoman asked when would there be a draft of the CDBG action plan available, and I said roughly in about a month's time in the middle of middle of August. In that draft of the action plan, one of the things that we have to do is say how that $19.98 million is going to be spent across the various activities. So you will have that in roughly about a month's time for the CDBG funds across the various types of projects that we're looking at. Housing, economic development and infrastructure, what would be the breakout in each of those areas and how we would plan to use that $19.98 million. Thank you.
Let me ask one last question.
Yes, sir.
I seen you leaving, and I thought I'd just ask one last question.
Not
We
leaving,
talking about
just going to sit down.
Yeah, let me just ask this. A part of the final draft what will be included in that other than, we said, the buzzword for me, of course, is housing.
Yes, sir.
And there are going to be some strategic areas where land is available and where we are able to do some of that. Will that report also give us in some kind of form where those properties have been, or is that a part of?
No. So the action plan would not specifically target in a way that the state required for your buyout program a list of targeted properties, and you all were talking about that earlier. Right. The action plan to HUD does not get nearly that specific and say these particular properties or projects would be targeted. In some cases, you have such a large project in a community that you're planning to put some of the money towards, that it would show up as a big line item in the action plan. But generally what the action plan will say is, we plan to use X millions of dollars for housing. And in housing, we plan to do these types of activities. I listed 4 that are under consideration: affordable housing development, elevation, some type of rehabilitation for homes that were damaged. Those, are 3. So just taking those 3 categories, for example, we would say of the roughly $20 million that we plan to use X millions of dollars for that in those 3 categories, we would use this amount. Again, one of the key, though, drivers of this is the analysis of the data and what the unmet needs are. So it can't be, something that's just aspirational and we think would be a great thing for the community. The law requires literally the act from Congress requires that that money goes to address an unmet need. And to use it for something that is not an unmet need from the disaster that happened in the first weekend of October last year would literally take an act of Congress for us to be able to do it.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
Not a question, but just a statement and a reiteration. I think Ms. Devine is right on target. I think at some point in time, this council has got to decide where we are going to be in terms of legitimizing those dollars, whether it's housing, of which that is a big portion of what takes place in, what has to take place, I think, in Columbia. So at some time, look, I've been inundated with letters, emails. Each one of us have gotten an equal share of those things. I think at some point in time, we've got to decide whether or not housing is going to be a real priority for Columbia. And if it's not a priority, then let's look at something else. But I think the continued emphasis ought to be there. And we've got to collaboratively at some point make some decisions about that. Thank you. I'm through now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And council, if I could ask Missy Kaufman to come up so we can just make sure we didn't glaze over a few things, because between now and the next time we would meet, there'll be a lot of activity as far as us submitting and meeting deadlines.
Thank you. So yes, as Ms. Wilson said, between now and September 1st, the next 6 weeks, there's going to be a lot of activity on a variety of these grants that are listed before you. The flood recovery program as a whole covers a number of different projects and activity, and today we specifically have talked about two of those, one of which is the property acquisition program, and the other is the CDBG DR program. Specifically with the property acquisition, Joe pointed out to you several different grant sources that we are seeking to fund that program. And that's been definitely a priority of City Council, and as you know, that's obviously been of interest to the property owners, and specifically that were impacted by the floods, especially those that were substantially damaged. So with those grants, every grant that we are seeking on the FEMA, with the FEMA side of the programs, but PDM, FMA, and the HMGP 404 program, I don't know what happened to our slides, it's a 75% fund from those sources. The other 25% fund is a required match. Property owners have been notified that 25% match in the project cost would be their cost to bear. So we just want to make sure we're all clear on that component as well. And of course, of the properties that we've submitted, we won't know how many of those properties will be funded or how much of the total grant will be until we complete the application process. We've contacted 236 property owners, as was indicated earlier. We've heard from about 60 property owners. We're going to be doing another mailing to property owners here this week, with that deadline being, I think, August the 12th. With the grant being due September 1st to the state, we have to set some hard deadlines so that we can complete a very lengthy and detailed application. And that's just the first step. If the grants are awarded, then there's a number of sequence of steps that still have to occur in order for there to be property. One of the final actions that would have to happen, if once, as you all know, in order for the city to buy and sell property, has to be an appraisal, and City Council has to approve it. So those properties would come back to City Council based on our own code of laws for purchase. And we have discussed with the city attorney as to whether or not that would be sort of some type of group determination, or if it would be property by property. Before it's all said and done, the 63 property owners that we've heard from, between now and the grants are finally approved, the property owner could back out of that grant at any point in time. So they're not committed until they actually complete the closing process. So again, just to reiterate, we may not have a number of properties until closer to the actual application. So between now and September 1st, a lot of activity on writing the grants for the property acquisition program. and in particular, communication of what the program requirements are will be pretty essential. And property, and as indicated, the property owners that we have heard from and met with already, they are aware of the 25% match requirement. And the county is doing the same thing as well. If the other option is if any DR funds are identified, possibly in the program for the 25% match.
So,
Could you elaborate on that? Are we acquiring the property based on appraised value?
That is the program that we have put together. The state still has to approve what our program is, and of course, the property owner has the ability to accept or reject that recommendation. The biggest requirement that we have is that we're consistent across all the purchases. But yes, ma'am. Yes. Sure. That's a very good question, Ms. Plow. The first requirements would be, of course, the eligibility of that property with the state's FEMA's requirements. And FEMA has 3 requirements, specific requirements. One is that the property be in the floodplain. The other is that it be substantially damaged by FEMA's calculations, and that the other is that there is competitive loss. And that's it doesn't have to meet all of those criteria, but those are the 3 criteria. They have to meet at least one. So the city is also looking at, in terms of, since we'll have most likely more properties that want to be bought than there are funds available, prioritizing those properties based on a number of different criteria, some of which would include future use of those properties.
Please.
So absolutely, part of what we will do with these properties is evaluate whether or not they are already, the area that the properties are located are already in any adopted city plans, any land use type plans. Of course, some properties, some areas are going to be more likely for a green space, whereas other properties might be better for like a dog park or a community garden. We're also looking at a program, and we know that our consultants have told us about in Louisiana that was called Lot Next Door, which basically the property owners on either side, once the city acquired the property, could deed the property back to the property owners on either side, so that then they would be responsible for maintaining it, but then it would also allow them to be responsible for the property and it not be public or open or public space. So we'll look at each property based on where they're located, and as we come back with that recommendation for acquisition, we'll certainly let council know. And Parks Recreation is included in that evaluation. We have not heard public properties as maintain green space, so that's part of the question that we are evaluating, because there's also a question about how the actual property would be, the property would actually be, in other words, what would be the transfer, what's the actual real estate transaction that we would do to deed the property. So we still have to investigate those type of things for South Carolina law. But as far as public use, we have not heard specifically as much as it is green space. So it could still be deeded to the property owner, but then the property owner would have obviously deed restrictions going forward. They could never develop anything on it. So, and in some cases, that makes more sense than in certain areas. In some areas, you know, open green spaces certainly. But we've also heard from some property owners who are neighbors to somebody who's wanting to be acquired, and they are very much concerned about the property next to them becoming open green space or public space. So, thank you. Ms. Plows? Okay, Ms. Plow? I wasn't sure where we cut off, so I'm just start from the beginning again. So the city does have, we are utilizing, of course, the first criteria or the eligibility is based on what FEMA determines as eligible properties. And the property must be either in the floodplain or substantially damaged from this past event, substantially damaged based on FEMA's definition. And then also or the other part of it is whether or not it's a repetitive loss property, which means the property would have had structural losses or flood claims prior to this event, but it has to have been structural damage, not just flooding on the property. And beyond that, the city will have a way to prioritize the property based on a number of factors, some of which, of course, will be based on life and safety matters as well as potential public use. Oh, and utility access being one of them, because in some cases there are some properties that the city would have an interest in because there's utility needs or utility accesses or easements identified that would be beneficial. You're welcome.
If council is comfortable with us proceeding as we've outlined, to include the 25% match of the citizens, then we wouldn't need for you all to take any action this evening. We'll just move forward as we've outlined and with submitting these different grants.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure we also widely publicize the upcoming meetings that the consultants described. Item on the agenda is a Clean Water 2020 program update by Mr. Jacob. Hey, Joey.
Wanted to give an update. I was given the presentation here a second to come up, but we're gonna, Brian Cully and I, Brian is our CDM program manager. He's here today with me to help give an update. I'm gonna provide an update as I normally do on the deliverables and where we are with our EPA deliverables. Spend a little bit more time on that today than I normally do because we've had a lot going since our last update, so I want to make sure everybody gets the proper update. We're going to talk about our next deliverable, which is the Infrastructure Rehabilitation Program. That deliverable is due later this year. It does go out on public notice. After today, we'll put it out for public notice and public comment. I'm going to let Brian come up and give us a condition assessment. Giving some examples, we're doing a lot of assessment of our system right now, so I'd like for him to come up and show some examples of what we're finding in our system and to give council an idea of what we're seeing when we're assessing our system. I want to provide an SSO update today for the last fiscal year and show how we've compared with the previous fiscal years, and then talk about some awards and improvements that we've, some achievements we've made, or some awards that we've gotten this year. Is the presentation up? Are y'all seeing anything yet?
Well, they're not going to, you all may need to print it if you think it's necessary.
Oh, okay. Oh, you've got. Okay.
I mean, I was hoping it was gonna be showing up here.
That was working? Was that yours?
I'll quickly walk through what is the Clean Water 2020 program. The Clean Water 2020 program is a program that we put together during our negotiations with the EPA when we began to negotiate our consent decree. And the purpose of the program is to help shepherd us through the consent process to make sure that we're meeting all of our deliverable requirements. As a result of the program, we have a lot of different programs we have to put together and submit to EPA. We have a schedule for all these programs to be submitted, but we also have a number of projects that roll out of all this. So the Clean Water 2020 program is a program. They're basically an extension of staff to help shepherd us through the process to make sure that we're doing everything we have to as a part of the consent decree. But also, as a result of that, we have a better system, better operating system, and better maintained system.
Bless you.
Okay, this is our list of deliverables. As you can see, the majority of it is grayed out. Those are the deliverables that we have submitted to EPA already, and the majority of those we've got an approval on. Our next submittal is the IRP, which is the Infrastructure Rehabilitation Program, and it goes to EPA later this year. So you can see it's a lot of the meat of the program has been submitted and essentially has been approved by EPA. But what that means is these are all programs that we basically tell EPA this is how we're going to do what's required of us as a part of the consent decree. So now that we've submitted it, it's been approved, now we have to do it. So that is an important part of the program, is to make sure that we've submitted everything on time, but now we have to follow through and complete all of everything that we've said we've had to do. The condition assessment program, that was one of the programs we've submitted a while back. That was approved recently, and we've been doing a lot of that to date. And basically what that program is how we assess our system. And then as a result of the condition assessment program, the next submittal is the IRP, which is the Infrastructure Rehabilitation Program. As a result of what's referred to as the CSAP, you learn a lot of these acronyms when you deal with these type programs. But as a result of the CSAP, and I'll get into this a little bit more, the IRP basically lays out how we take the assessment information, how we develop, how we're going to rehab our system. Then it rolls into a report, an IR report that goes to EPA that basically lays out our priority and how we're going to implement all these. But I'll get into that a little bit more when I get into the plan. But as a result of these programs being submitted, and we got very little comment from EPA. EPA actually came to town recently as a part of the force majeure. We've seen a positive result in what we've submitted. EPA had very little comment on what we have submitted to them, and I think that's a result of the good program that we put together here between our clean water program and really with our legal team as well. So I think that's a success. I think that's an achievement that we've had here with our program. But now that we've submitted all this, we have to follow through and do what we've said we've had to do. I did want to mention, as a part of the EPA coming to town, they came to town after our flood event, and we did request a force majeure as a part of the consent. We do have a force majeure clause, and with that, we did get some extensions to several of our deliverables, one of them being the supplemental environmental projects. We got a 6-month extension on those deliverables, but some of our maintenance deliverables, we've got a 12-month extension on that, as well as the actual fines that we pay for our overflows. We were able to get a 12-month extension for that as well. So I did want to mention that today. So the IRP, the Infrastructure Rehabilitation Program. Brian's going to pass out. We did a one-pager. We have done a one-pager for all of our submittals. So included in what Brian's passing out is a one-pager of the IRP, but also the other submittals, just as a reminder of what those submittals were as well. So what is the IRP? It's the Infrastructure Rehabilitation Program, and basically it lays out the policies and procedures for implementing the rehabilitation of our system. As a result of our condition assessment, we have to lay out a plan one, how do we assess it? But two, how do we rehab it once we get the results of our condition assessment? And that's what the IRP essentially is that plan for rehabilitation. It's basically the city's approach to how we replace or rehabilitate and inspect our assets. So that's what our next submittal is, and it goes, as I mentioned, it goes out on public comment. We'll put it out after today. It'll go on our Clean Water 2020 website, which I'll show in a minute, as well as a copy of it goes to the library for the public to review. So as an outline, we did a kind of a flow chart of what to better explain what the assessment programs, but the rehabilitation programs. And essentially what this is an infrastructure rehab roadmap. So the SMP is the sewer mapping program. That was our first submittal, and basically what that is we lay out the program, how we map our assets. And that was approved early on, and we've been doing that for a number of years, surveying our assets in the field. We had a map prior to us going under a consent, but as a part of the consent, we have to update that map and put it in a GIS format. And so that's what the sewer mapping program, it lays that out. Then once we have the roadmap in place, we have what's referred to as the CSAP, which is the Continuing Sewer Assessment Program of our system. And that's where we tell EPA, this is how we're going to evaluate our system, and over a certain time frame, we'll have completed the full assessment of our system. And that rolls into, that with the IRP, rolls into what's referred to as Infrastructure Rehab Report, which is the IRR. So all that comes together, the CSAP and the Infrastructure Rehabilitation Plan comes together and provides what's needed to put together the Infrastructure Rehab Report that goes to EPA, and that basically lays out the priority of the projects and our implementation schedule. And it shows up here Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3, Group 1 being the highest priority, and we have certain time frames to complete. So once we get through this roadmap, we will essentially have completed the program, and we can begin the negotiations to get out of the consent decree. So that's really the roadmap of the consent decree and all these programs that we're talking about. So the condition assessment program, Continuing Sewer Assessment Program, the CSAP. I'm going to let Brian come up and just kind of talk about what we're doing. We're going through the major condition assessment of our system right now, and what major refers to the larger lines of our system, which are 15-inch and greater, which is about 10% of our system. We've got 2 projects going on right now that will, once completed, we will have assessed those major lines.
Thank you, Joey. I appreciate it again. Brian Kelly with the Clean Water 2020 program. So Joey just talked to you about the CSAP and IRP, that requirement to assess our infrastructure and to plan the rehab and replacement of assets from sort of a program, theoretical roadmap standpoint. What I wanted to do was actually take a moment and talk to you about it from sort of the implementation side and show you a little bit of where do we stand right now. We're still early in the process in the program, but we're starting to get some early returns from the field and wanted to share that with you. So as we speak, and for the past several months, we've actually had contractors out there assessing our major lines, the trunk lines, the real backbone of the system. And we're starting to get some of those early returns coming in and to see what condition the system's actually in. We got about 20% in accepted that we've reviewed. And this is really important because before now, we really didn't understand what condition our system's in. We've still got about 80% more to go for these trunk lines, but whenever we talked about how much will it cost to fix and repair and rehab them, we were having to make assumptions as to what condition they were in. So this is something the city's going to catch up, do a big batch of now, assess all major lines, and then keep up with year to year going forward. So this is a very important part of the process. So what we do with these major lines, they're treated separately because they're big, 15-inch size diameter all the way up to 60-inch, a pipe large enough you could stand in. We're actually going through and running a camera, a CCTV video camera through the pipes and getting eyes on each pipe. We're doing something different for the smaller pipes, doing different technologies, but for the major pipes, we actually got video inside the pipe to establish condition. Once we're able to look at the video and establish condition, we combine that with criticality. A pipe that's right down by the river is more critical than a pipe that's not. A pipe under a railroad or interstate is more critical than one that's not. So we combine condition with criticality, and that, as laid out in the IRP, leads us to what we're going to rehab and rehabilitate and replace and/or inspect again, maybe to a higher frequency in the future going forward. So that is sort of the IRP in a nutshell.
Let me ask a question.
Yes, sir.
I think I understand pipes near railroads. What is critical about piping near river water?
Okay. So the issue, if a pipe failed near the river, the concern is that it's going to go, or into a water body, the concern is that that sewer that's going to spill into the ground is going to pollute the water body. Whereas if it's in a parking lot or field, you can capture it. It's not quite the public impact. So, you can see here there's a pipe of the system. The major pipe is spread throughout the entire system. Like I said, it's sort of the backbone of the system. And there's about 100 miles of pipe that we're assessing. Your total wastewater system is about 1,000 miles of pipe. Again, very large system. The major pipe is 100 miles of that. So that's what we're assessing. All right. What I want to do now is actually show you some still pictures of some of the pipe. I understand that about 7 or 8 years ago, wastewater maintenance actually brought in a grease ball and plopped it down on the table at a city council meeting. I promised Joey I would not do that today for a very good reason. But what I did want to do is show you some pictures. We'll go through these very quickly. Some of these pictures are good sewer. Some of these pictures are bad sewer pipe. That's why I've picked them. What I don't want to do is alarm anybody here that when I show a bad pipe, that the entire system's bad. That's not at all what I'm saying. So please understand that when I show broken pipe, it's just some examples of what we're finding. Something that's really important to note, what we found so far, the condition of that 20% that's come in is about the condition we expected as far as the ratios of good to bad. So here's an example I have up this good pipe. This is located over near Beltline Boulevard. And you can see there the pipe on the right, everything looks pretty good. I know it's tough to see in here with the glare on the screen, but this is what you look at, this is what you want to see. This is an example of good pipe. Here's another example of good pipe. This is over near Sunview Circle, near Kaufman Road. You look down it looks like a rifle barrel. That's perfect. This is what you always hope to see. This is what you don't want to see. This is an example on Bishop Gate Road near Old Bush River. So before and in the future, you're going to hear Joey come up and talk about I and I. You'll see like the letter I/I. That means inflow and infiltration. This is the best picture that we found in your system so far to highlight that. So this is where groundwater, because the pipe is below the water table, is seeping in through either a hole in the pipe or a bad gasket, a bad joint. So what happens is when you have a lot of these, particularly this is probably going to be worse after a rainstorm, when you have a lot of these, it starts to use up that capacity in the pipe. Okay? So then your pipe's not big enough and it'll overflow. Yes, sir?
The truck was in my neighborhood a month or so ago, and I sat in the truck and watched the TV with the operator, and he was kind of explaining this to me. What happens when they detect something like that? Do you go back and mark it on the street? That I know we've gotten a whole lot of pink markings and green markings all along the street now where this truck had gone. Do you go back and put the location of this type of damage?
Well, better than marking in the street, which is what the city would have done 10, 20 years ago, what we do now is we capture this electronically in the GIS systems, and Joey used the term CityWorks in a little bit, a computerized maintenance management system. So it'll keep track that this pipe had that defect forever. We can go back in 50 years and look back in the system and see. Most importantly, in a year or so, when we're going through the entire system and prioritizing where we need to do rehab and how soon we need to do it, we're going to have all the stuff in the system. We'll be able to score and weight pipes based on the condition and criticality and prioritize the rehab that way. So that's the important thing. We won't forget it. Some of these will be fixed immediately. If it's an impending or potential SSO, we will dig down and repair them right away. Most of these are going to be prioritized, and we'll get to them based on money available and however soon we can go. Here's another example of what we call infiltration. You can see the water on the top picture shooting in from the right, and you can see some other water squirting in from the left. Now, most I&I is more of a leaking or running down the side. These are pretty extreme examples here, but it'll show you what we do have in the system, what we do fight. Now, of course, rehabbing this line, if we were to put a new liner in, would stop this. Again, spend the money, fix the problem, but we can't fix all the problems in year one. You have to be able to prioritize it. An example of an operation and maintenance issue, this is a root ball. Again, this is a large diameter pipe. This is one of the reasons we'll ask residents that live near the sewer lines not to plant trees or large bushes on top of the pipe, because especially when it's dry, if they can get into a sewer pipe, it tends to feed them well, and they want to grow and get bigger and bigger. And this can get to be a problem, especially when they get to be this size. Another example of a root ball here, you can see this one's gotten to be rather extreme. This one's on Lucius Road near River Drive over near the CMRTA facility. These can be made even worse whenever grease collects on them, and then it clogs up, and it's just like putting a cork in the pipe, and you're going to get an overflow. Another example, this one's on Williamsburg Road near River Drive. If you see here, we've got broken pipe there on the left-hand side that's spilling into the bottom. This is clay pipe. You can tell with the joints every 4 feet. Skipping on to the next one, this is also on Williamsburg Road near River Drive, is where you can actually see the pipe missing out of the top part of the pipe, and it's now fallen down to the bottom, okay? That's not good. We're going to need to dig down, do a point repair, reline that pipe. Here's the takeaway that I really want to make sure everybody understands. What's really important is not that we've got some broken pipe in the system. Totally expected. We knew that going into it. What's important is that we now know about these problems. In the past, we would not have known about this and would have become obvious to us once it totally collapsed and we had an overflow. Now we're finding out about them ahead of time. We can prioritize the repairs and we can do the fixes. And doing a fix before it totally collapses and backs up is much, much cheaper than doing it once the emergency's already happened. So the fact that we're doing this ahead of time is really important. This last one is corrosion. This one's over near a creek and a road crossing at Kinley Creek near Piney Grove Road, and you can see a little bit in the picture again. It's tough with the lighting in here. You can see that the top of this pipe is starting to corrode out. The sewer environment is very harsh on pipe, as you can imagine, particularly concrete pipe, of which the city installed a lot in the late 70s, early 80s. And you can see that some of this roof of the pipe is essentially corroding out. And we expect to find more of this as we get into the larger and larger diameter pipes. All right, so again, we're going to take this condition assessment and we're going to combine that with criticality, and we're going to be coming back in the future with actual projects, rehab projects, to be able to get the city caught up. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Joey and let him talk you through some of the efforts we're doing on the smaller system.
So Brian talked about some of the condition assessment that we've got going on right now. If you remember, a few years ago, we replaced a large section of the main trunk line that comes down that carries the sewer from our northeast as well as the city. We replaced a good bit of the 42, 54, and 60-inch gravity sewer that basically ends at the West Columbia pump station. All of that was a result of some of those photographs that Brian showed where we had pipe collapse and we had sections of the pipe that didn't have a topping. So those are the type projects that will roll out of that. That was a major project we did a few years ago. But we've also done a number of, Brian talked about the major sewer assessment. We've done a number of the what we'll call minor sewer assessment and rehabilitation projects, and got a few of them listed here. But the next exhibit really shows the gray is our service area, and you can see the colored section. These are the projects that we've either already completed, we're doing, or are in our year one CIP to do. So we're doing a lot of rehabilitation work and assessment work right now. So this is, yes, sir.
What were the numbers beside those locations? Are those sections of a particular thing?
These numbers here?
Yeah,
these are phases. Saluda River Basin, phase 3, 6, 7. It's multiple phases. And does that answer your question? And if you look at this next exhibit, you can see the Saluda River is the blue. And you can see it's just different areas. It's a big basin, so we had to break it up into different smaller basins. And those numbers correlate with the different basins. But that's over 1 million feet of pipe that we've assessed and rehabbed to date, and it's about, I think it's about 5,000, approximately 5,000 manholes as well to date. So we're well into this and have been working on this for a number of years, even before we entered into the consent decree. But as a part of the program, we're doing it a lot more aggressively. So moving on, I wanted to give an update on the SSOs. This exhibit shows the SSOs since 2008, 2009, The yellow shows the total, and the blue shows the grease-related SSOs. So as you can see, since 08-09, we have trended down. We have somewhat plateaued. In this particular year, we did have an increase as to compared to last year. That is a result of the wet weather events that we had this fiscal year, beginning in September. As you can remember, the rain events really started in September, and they didn't stop until, I think, January. So as a result of that, we had a wet year, and we've somewhat plateaued, but we did have an increase in total number of SSOs as compared to last year. But the positive thing you can see there is one, we are trending down, looking back through the years. But the blue represents the grease-related, and we are continuing to trend down with our grease-related SSOs. And that's a result of the O&M that we are doing to our system. We're doing a lot more cleaning in our system now. We are prioritizing, and we're going to areas that we know we have grease issues. Public education, we're trying to educate our public. We can regulate restaurants, but we can't regulate our public on what they put down the drain. So we have to do that through public education, and having a program to educate your public, that really helps you in addressing your fat, oil, and grease. Which third, our fat, oil, and grease program, the program we do have where we regulate our grease traps and inspect our grease traps and just require they be in place and they be properly maintained. That really helps in fighting the grease in our system. The grease, as you can see, several years ago, grease was one of the main contributors to our SSOs. That's not the case today, but it's a result of the improvements in the program. So these are different. The different curves show the number of SSOs by month and how they grow through the year. And the blue, let me make sure I get my colors right. The blue is fiscal year 13-14. Yellow is fiscal year 14-15, and the lighter blue is fiscal year 15-16, which we just completed. You can see, beginning in August, September, we began to trend up in our number of SSOs, and by December, January, we did go above our past 2 years in number of SSOs. But after the wet weather events ended, you can see we somewhat leveled off. So had we not have had the wet weather event, we should have trended similar to what we had last year. And possibly, if we take out the number of wet weather SSOs, we take out the number of sewer line collapses that resulted in SSOs that can really be related to wet weather events, then we should have trended below we were last year, but we would have trended close. But you can see by month here when the wet weather events were and when they tailored off. And this is another example, and there's a lot of lines and a lot of colors on here, but I wanted to point out with this graph, you can see the top, it's a darker blue line there. Those are wet weather events, and you can see that we had a number of wet weather events up to December, January, and then after that, we didn't have any SSOs related to wet weather events. And if you compare that to the previous years, we had 42, I think, wet weather events this past fiscal year. The year before that, I think we had about a third of that. So the number of SSOs were really inflated this year because of the wet weather events. Okay, so I want to talk about some awards. The Clean Water Program received several awards this year. The first award here is the American Academy of Environmental Engineers and Scientists. That's a national award. There were 2 awards given out by this group this year. We received one of the awards. Los Angeles also received an award, so just give you an idea of who we're competing with for these type of awards. So it's a national recognition, so it's something that the City of Columbia needs to be proud of.
That's good stuff. Congratulations.
Yes, another one was the American Council of Engineering Consultants. That is a local, statewide award. The city received an award for the program this year. But wanted to point out, and I just found out last week, that 4 of our operators at our wastewater plant received a national award. This is an award that goes out to one utility, one person, or one group from our Water Environment Federation once a year, and 4 of our operators at our wastewater plant received this award. And that's pretty big, I think, and it's for their work and their performance during the flooding event. Our David Wyman, our superintendent at our Metro wastewater plant, submitted 4 of our operators, and out of the whole nation, they were selected to receive the award. So they will be presented the award in September of this year at the Water Environment Federation conference. So we're going to try to make sure that they attend the conference to be able to receive the award.
Absolutely.
We mentioned our website earlier. Clean Water 2020 has a really great and interactive website. It's dedicated to the program. It's how we communicate to the public what the program's doing, and also where we are with the deliverables with our consent decree. It has a lot of public information. But one thing it has an interactive map that you can actually go in, put in your address or an address, and it'll pop that up. It's got our GIS in the background, and it will show you projects that we have as a part of the program close to your neighborhood. So you can actually go in, look and see what's going on close to your neighborhood, but you can click on the project, and it'll bring up a one-pager of the project. That's what's to the right of the screen there, and it'll give you where we are within the process with that project, but give you some pictures, a little bit of information, so you can see what's going on as a part of the program and what's going on in your neighborhood. So I encourage everybody to take a look at that. Brian mentioned CityWorks. CityWorks is our asset management program that we use. It's how we track our work orders in our system, but also how we track the rehabilitation of our system. We've been using it for water distribution and wastewater collection and street division and public works since, I believe, 2010, for a number of years now. We are rolling it out. We just started this year with our sewer lift stations. We have about 55 sewer lift stations in our system, and we're now using CityWorks to track the work orders and the maintenance of those particular pump stations. We're rolling it out at our wastewater plant. We use a different asset management at our water plant, but we're rolling this out at our wastewater plant now. So as part of the program, we're implementing these work order systems to better manage our assets and the maintenance of our assets. A few other things. Our wastewater treatment plant lab was certified this year through DHEC, so we now have we have a certified lab on the water side, and we had one previously at our Metro wastewater plant a number of years ago, but we recently recertified our lab at our Metro wastewater treatment plant. What that means is we've always had a lab, we've always done samples, but now our samples are certified, so we can use our samples as a part. They're certified samples. We still use a third party with our regulatory samples. I think it's important that we have a third party that participates in the sampling of what we submit to DHEC, but we can use our lab now to do these samples. We've also implemented what's called a HOC-WIM system at our wastewater plant. And basically what this system is we collect a lot of data through the process of our treatment of our system, of our, at our wastewater plant. But we do it more intelligently. We take this data, we put it into, I'm going to mess this up, but it's a water information management system is what WIM stands for. We use that program to better analyze our system, but it also, we more intelligently are able to use it in the treatment of the wastewater. So it's important to note here too that we've implemented this in our system, and now we have people coming to Columbia to see how it's done. So I think we're now stepping up. We're doing things smarter. We're doing things more efficiently, and we're being a leader in the we're being a leader in how this is done. People are coming to Columbia to see how this is done. So I think it's important to point that out, that our folks are doing that. So with that, I'll open up for questions anybody may have. We'll have this on the website, this presentation, later today.
To Joey, the interactive system, so like the markings I mentioned to you outside and how Howard talked about markings on the street, would the system tell us what that is?
It wouldn't say specifically what the markings are, and I need to get back with you on your water meter. I'm
That's
sorry.
fine, I was just curious what they were, but an example like that, because I get people sometimes will ask, well, what are, they were out here and these markings are on the street, so if that would tell them, I would love to be able to tell people you can go into this system and it'll tell you what work we're doing in your neighborhood.
What the markings are their markings called before you dig, as through the PUP system. So they may be related to one of the projects in the Clean Water Program, but they may not either. So it could be a water project. We don't have the water projects uploaded into this system yet. So these are all wastewater projects now, but our goal is to have all of our projects in this system, so you can go in and look at a particular project, see what it is, get some more information on it, what type of project it is, but also see where we are in the process. So I don't want to say, yes, it does tell you, because it may not. It may just be that there's another project going on. But anytime we do a project, we have to call before you dig, and that's what those markings are.
Mr. McDowell?
Yeah. I think this is excellent presentation. I think you're right on target.
Thank you.
Where are we with brown water? And I mean, this is excellent. I think it's right on time. I think it gives us the visibility of knowing that something really is about to happen. My continued question is, Booker, Washington, and other areas that are affected with brown water, where are we with that?
We are in the process of rolling out our Year 1 CIP. As a part of that, we have a number of water quality projects. I would be better to put together a presentation directly related to that. This is our consent decree and EPA response. But I'd rather put a formal response to that together to be able to address your question. But we are moving forward with Year 1 CIP. What we'd like to do is, we put, I had the graph up here earlier illustrating what we referred to as the infrastructure roadmap. We'd like to do that for the water system as well, where we lay out a mapping plan, where we lay out a plan to how we are going to assess and rehabilitate our water system as well. So we have met internally as staff to begin that process. We know where our water quality problems are. We don't know where all of our galvanized pipe is in the system. We don't know where, potentially where all of our brown water issues are. But we know where the major ones are, and that's what we've got laid out in our CIP. So we have internally discussed as staff as to how we want to attack this, the whole brown water galvanized pipe replacement issue. So I'd rather come back with a formal response to that and lay out our plan.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But we can't, and I understand what we want to do here, but we can't legitimately talk about clean water until we raise the issue of brown water. It's problematic for areas in our city, and until we are able to harness that piece of the puzzle, it is going to be very, very difficult, I think, to look at anything without addressing with both barrels the whole issue of brown water. And perhaps this is going to at least allow us to see some of that. But it's almost like seeing it and getting it done is a totally different piece. And I don't want us to confuse the issue, because there are persons who are in brown watered situations. I don't want that. I think this program is great. I think we've got to really prioritize that whole issue. And we can't do that without bringing up constantly that our residents, some of our communities and residents have brown water in their pipes.
I think
But
the best way to, Reverend McDowell, that the best way, I think that as a staff, we've demonstrated that commitment to move forward is the way the budget shaped up for, this current fiscal year that we're in now. So I think what Joey's probably saying is, as you know, with the direction that the budget took with water and sewer, there was a concerted effort to make sure that we were moving projects forward as it relates to water quality. So I think he's suggesting that now that we were directed, you know, in that vein by this council, to allow us to show you how those year one projects are going to proceed. Because funding was put there for that reason.
I just don't want to lose sight.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Brown-
We're 19, what is this, 19 days into the new fiscal year, so we hear you and we're moving in that direction.
Thank you, Joey.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Yes, sir.
I think it's a good presentation, Joey. Sort of the blue and green lines, we all understand those two, the rest of them, in terms of colors on the street. But the issue of groundwater, you know, it's out there. I think it would help again if you can, not today, but
Give us.
the explanation of what we do, and what the procedure is when groundwater is identified and targeted in a given area. What do we do? What is the process? And I know we go in for the purpose of providing relief, through draining and whatever that process is. I'd like to see us get some more information on that. That becomes even for each of us an education process. There's some John Q. public doesn't really understand that either. But the question would be the timing. Once it's identified or reported, what is the process for going in and doing what needs to be done, and how long does that take?
Okay. It's a long answer. And I think what we need to do, I think what staff needs to do, since we've been given the directive to do something about it, is we need to put together a plan. And that's what we've done on the wastewater side to address the consent decree. And it's not going to be a quick resolution, but I think in order to do it properly is we need to put together a plan. We need to lay out how we assess the system, how we rehabilitate the system, and then how we lay out the priorities of what projects we do first and schedule it. So
That's what I'm asking. So
I'm just going to say, maybe we need to revisit the 4.2% rate increase to pay for these brown water problems. We got 3 votes here that would be in favor of that tonight.
well, I think
what you're going to have is
you know, we've already
13%
been
in 2
there.
years.
Groundwater is groundwater. It is a priority. If it's a priority, you go ahead and address it now, and don't wait. That's the whole issue. It's not that you know. But we don't need to
It's
revisit.
not bringing it.
We don't need to revisit that.
Well, and I guess to that point, and I was going to say that in all due respect, you know, it's not as easy as saying if groundwater is a priority, we address it now. And I think staff has been trying to address it. And I just wanted to kind of go back to Joe, because I know what you said and I know what you meant, and I think you need to clarify. You said now that we know it's a priority, we have a plan. We understand it's been a priority and there has been a plan. I think how you address that plan is contingent upon several factors. It could be financing, it could be manpower, it could be how we do contracts. And so maybe when you come back and give the bigger presentation, that's part of that. But I think we need to be very, very clear, because I think people are hearing, well, they just now found out brown water was an issue, and that's not the case. Or now it's a priority because certain members or certain people are raising a big deal about it, and that's not the case as well. So I just think we need to be very clear on how we say that, and we all may have different opinions about how you solve it, but the reality is we've known that at least certain parts of the city have had brown water, and it's continued to be in our CIP, but just like anybody else, if you have a budget and you have a certain amount of income, there's only certain things that you can do, and you have to plan for it over years. So we need to be very clear as the way we message that.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm sorry, I did say that the reality is we have had brown water, water quality projects in our CIP as far as we can probably all think back, and but ultimately it comes down to what can you do? What can you do with what you have? So.
And also what groundwater means in Columbia. I mean, and we've had an excellent discussion and presentation on that before to this council and to citizens, but in the context of everything that's gone on in this country over the last several months, it's very important to state and state it with clarity that our water is clean and it is safe. It is no excuse for any resident to have to see the color brown. But please, Joey, explain what that means when we keep saying brown water all across the city.
Brown water is a discoloration of the water. It is it's iron in the water is what you're seeing. It is not lead, which is what the nation.
So you need to speak up a little bit.
I'm sorry. It is not lead, which is what the nation is seeing. You know, I hate to keep bringing up Flint, Michigan. It's unfortunate, but the City of Columbia, through the Clean Water Act and through the corrosion control that the City of Columbia implemented back in the 90s, we've addressed the lead issue. We continue to sample for lead as a part of our requirements, but we don't sample as often because we have done a great job in our corrosion control program, and we'll continue to do that. We do offer sampling, and customers can have their water sampled. We have that program, information on our website, and we can provide additional information if needed. But the brown water is not. It is a discoloration of water. It is essentially it's rust in the water. It's the degradation of the pipes in the system. The galvanized pipes that when they were installed, they had lining, and through the years that lining has degraded, and what you're seeing is iron deposits in the system and in the water. It's not something we need to fix it. We need to address it, but it is not a water quality issue like lead in the water. So, from a life safety standpoint, yes, ma'am.
So let me, and I fully understand that, and you explained that, I believe, the last time we had a discussion. I guess my question, which was.
Let's make this the last question on topic to y'all.
Is very scientific. It's real, and it makes sense. Have we put that out? Have we explained that to the public? Okay. That I understand. That I don't have a problem with. It's a question of how that information, one, gets to the public, and two, and how we explain how we're approaching it. The degradation of certain types of pipes in the system is one thing. The issue being there for quite a while is one thing that then the question is, if it's been there for a while, that's where the full explanation comes in. How is it that we are at this point now rather than at some other point in terms of solving that issue? And I'll leave that for another discussion. So that's kind of what I think the public really wants to know. That's the full picture. And then how long is it going to take to, obviously it's not overnight, but discuss with the public. Because either way, we're in it with them and they're in it with us.
Mr. Mayor, we're ready for executive session.
Yeah.
One more item.
The last.
Thank you, Joey. And this is a very brief item. I did want to get the council at least talking about our city council retreat. As you've heard me say ever since I've been manager, I'm very much so encouraging you all to institutionalize an annual retreat, much like the one that you did a fabulous job of last year. I do think there's still more work to be done as far as really, I think you've got the foundation now, what we established with the last retreat, and a work plan. I think we need to really tool down onto what you want to see accomplished each given year. And so that was the thought, to go ahead and look at October. We mentioned that before, because I think due to various reasons, we got pushed towards the end of the year and into the beginning of the calendar year. I think it would be much better if we were able to meet in the October timeframe and lead into the new budget season. So I wanted to propose that. I did talk to our facilitator, because I think she has the foundation she's established with you to continue with you for another year at least. And she's available the last week of October, but she could also look at some other dates if that time frame is not suitable. And then Ms. Moore wanted to address our August meeting schedule due to National Night Out. So I don't know, do they all have this? Yeah. Everyone has the October City Council retreat meeting schedule memo with the October calendar. And if Ms. Moore went ahead and put a few things down, October 4th is our council meeting, October 18th is the council meeting, and the state fair is the 12th through the 23rd. I know football schedules are important to some of you. I'm not sure what's happening that weekend leading up to or after the last week in October.
State fair.
Oh, that's the state fair.
The state fair. Oh, the state fair. It's at the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. The dates that she just put to note are at the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry, and on the next page. Thank you. Oh, and the football schedule. Thank you, Erica. I didn't look on the other side. So there's some MASC training during that time frame. 2 home games at USC.
Do you want to do it on the same Thursday, Friday, and Saturday?
Are we doing 2 days, 3 days?
It's up to you all. I think 3-day at least, portion starting that evening, a full day, and then part of the last day worked well. If you all rather doing it during the week, or if you want to do that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to let her know what your preference was.
I think during the football season, we ought to do it on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday or something like that. Got to get your priorities straight.
Yeah, and it looks like home games are those last 2 Saturdays.
Yeah, the 22nd or the 29th. So
How about the 24th, 25th, and 26th? Anybody got any conflict?
yeah, the 24th, I'm speaking at the Obesity Summit.
Here?
Yeah, that'll be over at Brooklyn. Eat Smart, Move More. I don't know what time our presentation is, though. That's Monday.
We could
Did
go.
we
we could-
email those dates to you, some suggested dates, or you just want to confirm that in today?
Those dates are better for me.
Which?
The last few days of the month are better for me.
Last few
You can
days.
work around your speech.
So you want to email me your thoughts on the last week of October, the specific dates? Okay, sure. But you all, it looks like that last week will work for you, if I could at least
Works
tell her
for
that
me,
much.
and to make them, we could probably go in late in the afternoon on the 24th, like we did before.
Yeah, that probably would work for me. I'll make it work. hard on people who work. But I'll make it work. I can make it work.
Make it work, okay. And we'll check with the other council members not here. Thank you for that. As to August 2nd, the meeting time, our normal meeting time, you know, we always adjust for National Night Out, so we were thinking if you all started around noon and we tried to finish before 5, that would give you time to get ready to head out for National Night Out activities.
That's what we did last year.
That's good.
Okay. Oh, aren't y'all just so cooperative today? Thank you very much.
So while we're at it, can I raise, and Howard and I talked about this, I know we wanted to try and see how things work. I honestly not sure this setup really works for work sessions, and I know y'all put a lot of work into it. I'm not sure if we are gonna do it up here, if we couldn't just sit in our regular seats, because I mean, this, I feel like we're separated, and right now, it's only 5 of us. If all 7 of us are here, I think it adds to us being spread out, and so I would just offer us to think about how we best want a work session. I mean, the iPads and this, it's just a lot of moving parts.
We can still use iPads up there.
Up there, yeah, but I'm just saying it would be, yeah.
Erica, how do you like sitting up there?
You're getting my seat warmed up.
I'm fine with either way. It's good having this equipped as a place for a fallback. You know, so when the major challenge downstairs, and probably the only major challenge, was when we had large crowds, we couldn't accommodate, you know, citizens' needs. That was a challenge. But I'm fine with downstairs, and when it's obvious we're going to have a issue of major, you know, public participation, we move upstairs. I mean,
And I'm saying, even if we're upstairs, maybe we sit up there, and let the crowd, because even with this, we're turning around, and I just think, and I know they can't move this, but this separates us. It's not as conducive as we'd like it to be.
So you all don't want these nicely built tables anymore?
The tables will still be very useful.
Maybe
You could have
use
a
it for committee meetings and other things.
Well, let's try the work session up there next time, just as an experiment, see how we like it up there. It can still be relaxing, but they got the speakers so well up there, I can hear everything, I can see everything.
Okay.
And with the electronics that we have up there, our presentations are easier to see.
Okay. So we just making sure I understand. For the next work session, you all want to try it sitting up here.
Let's
the
do it
dais.
up there, and then
Okay.
if we don't expect
Let
a
me-
crowd sometime, we can go down to the mayor's office.
Let me ask you about these
There's
iPads
there's
since
a
we're
really-
having the discussion.
There's a really cool room in the basement. We should start moving in. I mean, it really, you can lay out and bring our futons, bean bags, pass around some snacks. We have a great meeting. Costs nothing, right? Right, Dutch? So, oh, wear a mask. Okay.
Wear your
Asbestos said. I'm sorry.
We're still working through some challenges with these iPads, and I anticipate we'll have all that worked out, correct, by next meeting. We will have that worked out. The iPad Pros are larger, and I did hear some of you mention just being able to see as well on these smaller ones. Is that really an issue for you before we make adjustments, or?
I wonder, Teresa, so it may be the software that we use, but even the ability to expand the screen, is that just some of the software or those particular?
On the items that.
Yeah. I mean, so just even the ability just to be able to pinch and expand. Can we fix that on this? I mean, that would, I mean,
So the actual stream itself can't expand it out.
Okay.
It's either the size it's at or slightly smaller.
That's called helping to get the bug out of it.
Larger, but you still wouldn't be able to pinch in.
that's just because of the software, the stream.
Because you're basically viewing a video stream.
Y'all need them larger? think however we do it, you need to be able to have it larger?
I don't know.
I can see most of it.
All right, well, we'll work something out before the next council meeting, and we will seat you up here, and Miss Erica can come down here with me. And I don't know what we're gonna do with the tables, we'll figure it out. All right, Mr. Mayor.
Keep the tables, I don't.
I mean, I said keep the tables, you still need a table.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
This also works, I think, for some committee meetings, that sort of thing. I mean, it's not going to waste at all.
You want to move committee meetings up here too?
Is there a motion to go to executive session?
No, we're gonna keep
We're
the
not-
tables, I just meant the placement of them.
We're in a brave new world. Someone has to make the actual motion. Come on. Yes, ma'am.
Moved for executive session for receipt of legal advice relating to matters covered by attorney-client privilege, ethics bill, tree removal policy, billboard site, discussion of negotiations incident to propose contractual arrangements, school street development agreement, and discussion of negotiations incident to propose purchase of property, Weston Avenue.
I'm gonna put them in the field, ain't gonna be a lot.
Yes.
Aye.